My wife, Eleanor, had always been active on social media, but the notification that popped up on my phone one evening made my blood run cold. There it was, a picture of her and William, my brother, locked in a passionate embrace, posted for the world to see. A sickening feeling washed over me. I immediately screenshotted it and confronted her. "What is the meaning of this, Eleanor?" I demanded, my voice trembling. But she just laughed it off, her eyes gleaming with a strange mix of amusement and defiance. "Oh, Arthur, darling, don't be so dramatic. It's just a silly filter, a bit of fun. You know how these apps are." She waved her hand dismissively, as if I were being utterly ridiculous. "Honestly, at your age, you're getting so suspicious. It's quite unbecoming." Her words were like a slap in the face, but a seed of doubt, however small, still lingered. Perhaps she was right. Maybe I was being paranoid. But something felt deeply wrong. Later that night, while Eleanor was asleep, I couldn't resist. Driven by a gnawing unease, I carefully picked up her phone. My heart pounded in my chest as I navigated through her messages and photos. What I found stole the air from my lungs and left me reeling. It wasn't just one photo, or two. It was hundreds. Hundreds of intimate pictures of Eleanor and William, intertwined, laughing, whispering secrets in our home, even in our bed. My blood ran cold. Then, the messages. Words that seared themselves into my memory. "William, you are the only husband in my heart. Besides, Arthur has raised your son for so many years, it's not like we owe him anything. So what if he married my girlfriend? Letting him raise my child for decades is just his due. Come see me, darling, I miss you." My hands began to tremble uncontrollably. As I scrolled further back, the horrifying truth unfurled like a poisonous vine. They had been documenting this sordid affair for a decade, 10 years. While I was out working myself to the bone, providing for them, they were betraying me in the most despicable way imaginable. A wave of dizziness washed over me. Suddenly, Eleanor's long-standing excuses, her coldness, her rejection of my affection, all clicked into place with sickening clarity. For decades, she had claimed a psychological aversion to intimacy after our son, Ethan, was born. "Arthur, please, have you no decency?" she would scold, recoiling from my touch, pointing to our infant son in his crib. "Not in front of the baby. Can't you see the boundaries?" Guilt and shame would wash over me. I had been so understanding, so patient, respecting her supposed condition. Now, the truth was a brutal punch to the gut. It wasn't a condition. It was William. She had been preserving herself for William all along. And then the most devastating revelation of all hit me. My son, Ethan, the boy I had cherished and adored for 20 years, he wasn't mine. Not mine at all. Despair threatened to engulf me. I remembered William's tearful confession years ago, how he lamented his poverty, his inability to marry the woman he loved. I, in my misplaced compassion, had even lent him $5,000, offering hollow words of encouragement to move on. His girlfriend, Eleanor. They had been playing me for a fool, patiently waiting, preying on my naivete. Eleanor had pursued me relentlessly. Our courtship had been whirlwind. Her family, the Bennetts, had been so welcoming, so eager for our union. When I proposed, they had accepted with suspicious haste. Even at our engagement party, when I introduced William as my best man, not a single soul had hinted at their past, at their true relationship. If not for this accidental social media post and my subsequent snooping, I would have remained blissfully ignorant, a cuckold for life. My phone buzzed, snapping me back to the present. A text from Ethan. "Hey Dad, back tomorrow. Pick me up, yeah?" Then, another. "Oh, and my card's running low. Can you transfer another 10 grand? $10,000. Just like that. 2 months ago, he had dramatically announced his departure for some fancy summer camp. Then, just as abruptly, he declared it wasn't his scene and demanded to come home. After I'd pulled strings and greased palms to even get him in, I stared at the messages, numb. I didn't reply. I just sat there on the edge of the bed, the weight of 30 years of deception crushing me. I wanted to confront them both, to unleash my fury. But then, another notification. William had posted a video on social media. Curiosity, morbid and painful, compelled me to click. There was Ethan, my son, beaming, showering William with affection, presenting him with a pair of expensive designer shoes. The caption read, "Thanks to my wonderful son. First thing he does when he gets back is spoil his dad." His dad, William. The casual cruelty of it was breathtaking. Ethan, who treated me like an ATM and a servant, was lavishing gifts and affection on William. I remembered the time I had jokingly asked Ethan for a small gift, just once. He had tossed me a cheap plastic bag, the kind you get free with a shoe purchase. "Here, Dad," he'd said, his tone dismissive. "This came with William's shoes. Suits you." At the time, I'd been hurt, but I had brushed it off. Now, the pieces slammed into place, forming a grotesque, horrifying picture. Ethan knew. He had known all along. My life, my marriage, my fatherhood. It was all a grotesque joke. For 30 years, I had been the dutiful husband, the doting father, the tireless provider. No matter how demanding my work at the company, I always made time to cook for them, to cater to Eleanor's whims. She, with her supposed germ phobia, had declared housekeepers unacceptable, leaving all the domestic chores to me. I had poured every ounce of my energy, my love, my life into this family, and for what? For this? Not a single word of thanks, not a shred of genuine affection, just constant demands and thinly veiled contempt. Something inside me snapped. The last fragile thread of hope, of delusion, finally broke. Clarity, cold and sharp, pierced through the fog of my years of denial. I was done. Done being used, done being a fool. I would no longer waste another second, another penny, another drop of emotion on Eleanor and her son. The decision was immediate, liberating. I logged into the bank app and canceled Eleanor and Ethan's supplementary credit cards. The sense of finality was almost exhilarating. It wasn't long before Eleanor stormed back into the house. She was clearly intoxicated, her face flushed, her eyes glazed. "Arthur," she slurred, her voice imperious. "Get me a hangover cure now. I feel like I'm going to be sick." I remained seated, watching her with a detached curiosity. No emotion, just a cold, clinical observation. Where had she been? With William, of course. Out enjoying herself, indulging in her illicit affair, then returning home, expecting me to play the dutiful servant. The audacity was staggering. When I didn't move, her tipsy entitlement morphed into petulant anger. "Did you hear me, Arthur? Get up and make me that drink. Now." In the past, no matter how exhausted I was, I would have jumped to her command. But tonight, something had shifted. I felt nothing but a profound weariness and a simmering disgust. "Make it yourself, Eleanor," I said, my voice flat and devoid of emotion. "And stop yelling at me. You're not well." Eleanor froze, her eyes widening in disbelief. This was the first time I had ever refused her, ever spoken back with anything other than placating agreement. Her face contorted with rage. With a guttural cry, she ripped the duvet off the bed, throwing it to the floor. "How dare you? Arthur, get up this instant." She advanced on me, her voice rising to a screech. "You've been lazing around all day. Just get up and do as you're told, for once." I was about to unleash a torrent of pent-up anger when the shrill ring of the phone cut through the tense silence. Ethan. He had discovered his credit card was deactivated. "You old fool," he shrieked into the phone, his voice laced with fury. "What the hell did you do? My card's not working." His tone was pure entitlement. I was just about to buy gifts for Mom and William, and now everyone's staring at me. "You've embarrassed me." Eleanor, momentarily distracted from her tantrum, glared at me, her drunken haze clearing to reveal a cold, hard anger. "Why did you cut off Ethan's card? He's just spending a little money. You're so unbelievably stingy." A bitter laugh escaped my lips. "Stingy? Eleanor, how dare you even ask me that? What about you and William? How long have you been playing me for a fool? How much longer were you planning to keep up this disgusting charade? Oh, for goodness sake, Arthur, not this again. Eleanor rolled her eyes, her patience clearly exhausted. I told you, it was a filter. Are you going to keep harassing me about this forever? She waved her hand dismissively and stomped towards the bathroom. A moment later, the retching sounds of her vomiting filled the room. I watched her go, a strange sense of calm settling over me. Without another word, I picked up the discarded duvet, grabbed a pillow, and walked into the spare bedroom. I made myself a makeshift bed on the couch and closed the door, shutting out the sounds of Eleanor's theatrical misery. Let her rant and rave. I wouldn't hear it anymore. For the first time in years, I slept soundly. The next morning, another text from Ethan. Airport. Now. He hadn't even bothered to ask, just another demand. I hesitated. A flicker of paternal instinct, foolish as it was, still tugged at me. It's not his fault, a weak voice whispered in my head. Maybe he doesn't know. And even if he did, he was still Ethan, the boy I had raised. And if I didn't go, who would? Eleanor certainly wouldn't lift a finger. Sighing, I got dressed and drove to the airport. As I entered the arrivals hall, I spotted Ethan surrounded by a group of teenagers, all laughing and jostling each other. But the laughter wasn't friendly. It was mocking. Look at his dad, one of them jeered, pointing in my direction. Who knew Ethan's dad was so ancient? No wonder he's so embarrassing. My heart sank. Years of relentless work, of sacrificing my own needs for my family, had taken their toll. I hadn't prioritized my appearance, hadn't bothered with fancy clothes or trendy haircuts. I was just Dad, old Dad, and apparently that was a source of shame for my son. Just as I was about to intervene, to put a stop to their cruel teasing, Ethan spoke. His face was flushed crimson, but his voice, though strained, held a surprising note of defiance. No, he's not, he retorted, his eyes flashing. My dad isn't ugly. A surge of warmth, of something akin to pride, flooded through me. He defended me, I thought. He does care, a little bit. Maybe my years of effort hadn't been entirely in vain. Maybe there was still a spark of connection, of love, between us. But the fragile hope shattered as quickly as it had bloomed. Ethan reached into his pocket and pulled out a photograph. It was a picture of him and William, grinning side by side. He held it up for his tormentors to see, his voice dripping with smugness. This is my real dad, he announced, his tone laced with disdain. The old guy over there? He's just our driver. The words hit me like a physical blow. I froze, rooted to the spot, my phone slipping from my numb fingers and clattering onto the tiled floor. The teenagers turned, their laughter abruptly ceasing as they registered my presence. Ethan's eyes widened in panic. He frantically gestured for me to be quiet, to disappear. Disappointment, raw and bitter, washed over me. I bent to retrieve my phone, then turned and walked away, every step heavy with disillusionment. Ethan, panicked, scrambled. After me. Hey, you, driver, he yelled, his voice echoing through the hall. Where do you think you're going? And wipe that face, or I'll tell my dad to fire you. The teenagers erupted in fresh peals of laughter. Something inside me snapped. I spun around, grabbing Ethan by the collar of his expensive jacket. Driver? Am I? I hissed, my voice trembling with fury. Then why are you living in the driver's house? And who's paying for your fancy school, huh? The driver? Ethan's face hardened. Without a word, he swung his fist and punched me squarely in the jaw. The physical pain was nothing compared to the emotional agony. In that moment, any lingering vestige of fatherly affection, any shred of connection, evaporated. Our relationship, such as it was irrevocably broken. I released him, turning my back and walking away. I got into my car and drove straight to the office, ignoring the insistent buzzing of my phone. Eleanor called repeatedly, but I silenced it, letting her calls go unanswered. By the time I returned home that evening, the lock had been changed. I hammered on the door for 5 solid minutes, the noise echoing through the quiet building, attracting the curious stares of neighbors. But Eleanor and Ethan remained stubbornly silent, playing dead behind the locked door. Finally, losing all patience, I called a locksmith. The door clicked open, and I stepped inside, the curious faces of my neighbors peering in behind me. Eleanor, face plastered in a thick green face mask, sat on the sofa beside Ethan, casually eating fruit. She glanced up, a flicker of annoyance in her eyes, then nonchalantly hurled an apple core at me. It bounced off my chest and landed on the floor. "You heartless old bastard," she shrieked, her voice muffled by the mask. "What do you think you're doing, cutting off my cards? You make all that money, and you can't even let me spend a little, and leaving Ethan stranded at the airport. What kind of monster are you?" The neighbors, ever eager for drama, chimed in, their voices laced with disapproval. "Honestly, I always thought your wife was such a nice woman. Why wouldn't she open the door? Being so petty and controlling, especially with your own wife. It's shameful for a man your age." Outsiders, knowing nothing of the years of deception, the decades of betrayal, were quick to judge, siding with Eleanor based on her carefully constructed facade of victimhood. Emboldened by their support, she pressed her advantage. She demanded I reactivate her credit cards, threatened to bar me from entering my own home if I didn't buy her a $10,000 handbag immediately. "Yes, Mr. Wong, you make so much money," one of the neighbors piped up, his tone self-righteous. "It's time to loosen the purse strings for your wife." Moral blackmail, delivered with the casual cruelty of the uninformed. Ethan, ever the opportunist, chimed in, adding his own venom to the chorus of condemnation. "Yeah, even if I did call you driver, so what? You're so embarrassing to be seen with anyway. Look at yourself." I stared at them, at Eleanor's painted face, at Ethan's sneering contempt, at the judgmental faces of the neighbors, and a cold fury began to simmer within me. Enough. I had endured enough. Why should I continue to swallow their abuse, to play the doormat? If they wanted a fight, they would get one. With a swift, decisive movement, I swept my arm across the coffee table, sending the bowl of fruit flying. Apples, oranges, grapes scattered across the room, rolling across the floor, a chaotic mess mirroring the chaos in my heart. Eleanor shrieked, leaping to her feet, her face mask cracking. She lunged at me, her nails extended like claws. But I was faster. I grabbed her by the hair, yanking her towards the door and shoving her out onto the landing. Ethan, sputtering with outrage, followed her. Before either of them could react, I slammed the door shut and locked it, bolting it firmly against them. "You want money?" I shouted through the closed door, my voice raw with emotion. "Fine. You'll never see another penny from me. Not 1 cent." The neighbors outside erupted in a cacophony of shocked gasps and indignant protests. But I didn't care. Let them gossip, let them judge. I was done. I was finally, blessedly, free. I had even taken a day off work to pick up Ethan, a day wasted on a boy who saw me as nothing more than a driver. Later, a text message pinged on my phone. It was Eleanor. "Arthur, I'm sorry. Let me back in. It's freezing out here." I stared at the message, unmoved. 2 hours ago, when I was pounding on the door, begging to be let into my own home, they had shown no mercy, no compassion. Now, suddenly, she was cold? Let her freeze. Let them both freeze. 2 hours later, I woke up, stiff and sore from sleeping on the couch. I was going to the lawyer's office. It was time to make this official. As I opened the front door, Eleanor and Ethan burst in, a whirlwind of fury and indignation. "You old monster!" Eleanor shrieked. "You were serious, ignoring all my calls. I will never forgive you for this." Ethan glared at me, his expression a carbon copy of William's. The resemblance was chilling. I walked calmly into the bathroom, collected Ethan's toothbrush and mine, and walked out again, heading for the door. "Where do you think you're going?" Eleanor demanded. "To the hospital," I replied, my voice flat. "For a paternity test." I spent the agonizing hours waiting for the results, pacing the sterile hospital hallway, sitting on cold plastic chairs, staring blankly at the faded posters on the walls. In truth, there had been so many signs, so many red flags over the years. But I had been willfully blind, choosing to believe the lie, clinging to the illusion of family. People had even remarked, casually, how much Ethan resembled William, especially when we were all out together. I had dismissed it as coincidence, as idle chatter. The doctor called my name, his voice tinged with a practiced sympathy. He handed me the envelope. The results were stark, unambiguous. As I already knew, Ethan was not my son. No biological relationship. The doctor placed a comforting hand on my shoulder, a silent gesture of condolence. I managed a weak, humorless smile and left, heading straight to the lawyer's office. When the lawyer asked about property division, I stated my case, calmly and clearly. For 30 years, I have been the sole provider. My wife has never worked. I believe a fair division of assets is appropriate. The lawyer nodded in agreement. Given the circumstances and her role in the breakdown of the marriage, your request is entirely reasonable. Within half an hour, the divorce papers were drafted. I read them carefully, ensuring every detail was correct, and then signed, the pinstrokes feeling surprisingly light, almost liberating. I returned home, divorce papers in hand, ready to finally sever the ties that had bound me to this toxic charade for so long. Eleanor and Ethan were still lounging in the living room, seemingly unfazed by the events of the previous night. Eleanor, with a dismissive wave of her hand, ordered me to make dinner. I ignored her, walking directly to her and handing her the divorce papers. "What is this?" she demanded, her voice laced with disbelief. "Divorce? Over a silly photo? Are you insane?" I stared at her, my expression devoid of emotion. "Don't insult my intelligence, Eleanor. It's not about one photo. I've seen your phone. I know everything." You snooped through my phone? That's an invasion of privacy," she sputtered, her face flushing with anger. "Besides, even if you did see something, it's just for fun." Before she could fabricate another lie, another pathetic excuse, I slapped her. Hard. 30 years of bottled-up frustration, of suppressed rage, exploded in that single, decisive act. In all our years together, I had never laid a hand on her. But her brazen infidelity, her utter lack of remorse, her continued attempts to manipulate and deceive me. It was the final straw. Ethan, his eyes wide with shock, jumped in front of Eleanor, shielding her with his body. "You want to hit someone? Hit me, you coward. What kind of man hits a woman?" I didn't rise to his baiting. Instead, I calmly retrieved the paternity test results from my briefcase and tossed them onto Ethan's lap. "Here," I said, my voice cold. "Take a look. You and I have no blood relation. You're not my son. So, stop calling me names and stop living in my house. Otherwise, I'll call the police and report you for trespassing." The color drained from Ethan's face. Eleanor gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Ethan picked up the report, his eyes scanning the document with disbelief. This is fake," he stammered, his voice trembling. "It has to be. I am your son. His voice trailed off as the undeniable truth sank in. He turned to Eleanor, his eyes pleading, accusing. "Mom, is it true? Did you cheat? Who is my father?" "Well, darling, who do you think?" I interjected, my voice laced with sarcasm. "Your beloved William, of course. Aren't you thrilled? You finally get to acknowledge your real father." Eleanor burst into tears, the carefully constructed facade of defiance crumbling. "Arthur, please, no. I'm sorry. Don't do this. I don't want a divorce. Please, don't be so cruel." But I knew it was all an act. She wasn't sorry for betraying me, for destroying our marriage. She was sorry for getting caught, sorry for the social humiliation, for the potential financial repercussions. "Mom, don't beg him," Ethan said, his voice surprisingly firm. He stood up, pulling Eleanor to her feet. If William really is my father, then I'm glad. I'd be proud to have him as my dad. I had expected this reaction, and yet, hearing it aloud still stung. 20 years of love, of sacrifice, dismissed so casually, so easily. William, with his superficial charm and empty promises, had won my son's affection with minimal effort. Excellent, I said, my voice flat. Then sign the papers. Both of you. And pack your things and get out. Ethan scoffed. Why should we leave? This is our home too. I fixed him with a cold stare. This house is mine. I bought it outright. My name is the only one on the deed. Get out. I turned and walked into the bedroom, grabbing Eleanor's suitcases and starting to throw her clothes into them. Eleanor sank to the floor, sobbing theatrically. Ethan, however, seemed to have undergone a sudden change of heart. His bravado seemed to have evaporated, replaced by a flicker of something almost resembling remorse. Dad, he began hesitantly, the words sounding foreign and uncomfortable on his tongue. I know Mom messed up, and you're really hurt, but you've been married for so long. Can't you forgive her? Don't be so extreme. I rolled my eyes, walking into Ethan's room and starting to empty his drawers and wardrobe. Don't call me Dad, I snapped. William is your dad. Go. Live with him. And Eleanor, I said, tossing a pile of her designer shoes into a suitcase, make sure you schedule a time to finalize the divorce. Eleanor, seemingly realizing the game was truly over, finally signed the divorce papers, her hand trembling slightly. She grabbed Ethan's arm and stormed out, slamming the door behind her with unnecessary force. As the sound of the closing door echoed through the suddenly quiet house, a wave of exhaustion washed over me, followed by an unexpected sense of relief. William's financial situation was nowhere near mine. He was not a patient man, nor a particularly forgiving one. Eleanor was demanding, high maintenance, and prone to histrionics. Ethan was entitled and selfish. Let them try to build a happy family together. Let them discover the harsh realities of life without my resources, without my unwavering support. I doubted their newfound family bliss would last long. I scheduled the divorce finalization appointment for the next day. Then, I began to clean up the mess in the living room, picking up the scattered fruit, the broken pieces of my past. The house was a wreck, but for the first time in a long time, my heart felt lighter. Perhaps, finally, I could start to rebuild, to heal, to find a measure of peace. And maybe, just maybe, I should send William a thank you note. He had, after all, inadvertently set me free. True to form, Eleanor did take Ethan to William's place. But I had underestimated William's utter lack of shame. He actually had the audacity to seek me out, to confront me, spewing a torrent of self-justification, claiming it was my fault, that I owed him. Why should your family have been so much better off than mine? He snarled, his face contorted with envy and resentment. Why should my girlfriend have been forced to endure 30 years with you because of it? He actually said, endure. 30 years of my life, my loyalty, my financial support, reduced to mere endurance for Eleanor. The gall of the man was breathtaking. Well, at least now you know the truth, he continued, puffing out his chest, as if he had achieved some great victory. Saves me having to keep up the pretense. I didn't waste a single word on him. Disgust churned in my stomach. I simply blocked his number and deleted him from my contacts. Silence was the only answer he deserved. The next afternoon, I arrived at the registry office well ahead of time. But closing time approached, and still, no Eleanor. I called her number repeatedly, but each call went straight to voicemail. Finally, a text message flashed on my screen. Arthur, I'm not going to divorce you. I'm not coming. I almost laughed, a bitter, humorless sound. Her audacity was astounding. Divorce is not optional, Eleanor, I texted back, my fingers flying across the keypad, my anger simmering beneath the surface. Either you show up, or I will file in court. And trust me, a contested divorce won't be pretty for you. My words had the desired effect. Her response came almost instantly, a panicked plea. Why can't you forgive me, Arthur? Just this once? I promise. I'll never contact William again. Isn't that enough? Enough? After decades of deceit? After discovering my son wasn't even mine? Her sense of entitlement was staggering. I cut off the call, ending the pathetic charade. I was done arguing, done pleading, done hoping for any semblance of remorse or understanding from her. Soon after I arrived back home, my phone buzzed again. Eleanor. Her name flashed across the screen, mocking me. A complex mix of emotions warred. Within me, anger, resentment, a lingering sadness for the ghost of the woman I thought I had known. Against my better judgment, I answered. Arthur, please, don't hang up. Just listen to me. Her voice pleaded from the other end, laced with a desperate urgency. I cut her off, my voice cold, devoid of emotion. Eleanor, I've made myself perfectly clear. If you are not at the registry office by tomorrow morning, consider yourself served. I will file for divorce unilaterally, and you will get nothing. Silence stretched between us, heavy and thick with unspoken recriminations. I could almost hear her internal struggle, the calculations whirring in her manipulative mind. Then, a choked sob. You can't do this to me, Arthur. We've been together for so long. She trailed off, searching for words that would sway me, words that no longer held any power. Enough, Eleanor, I interrupted, my voice weary, the fight draining out of me. I'm tired, truly tired. I don't want to hear any more excuses. Tomorrow morning, registry office. Be there, or face the consequences. Without waiting for a reply, I ended the call, tossing my phone onto the sofa as if it were a venomous snake. I walked into the kitchen, my legs feeling heavy, and poured myself a glass of water, the cool liquid a small comfort as it slid down my parched throat. But it did little to quench the burning anger that still raged within me. Leaning against the kitchen counter, I closed my eyes, taking a deep breath, trying to regain some semblance of composure. It was strange, this cold, detached persona I seemed to have adopted. Was this really me? Perhaps Eleanor had finally broken something fundamental within me, leaving behind only this hardened shell. I had trusted her implicitly, loved her with a devotion that bordered on foolishness, and in return, she had offered only betrayal and deceit. The betrayal I could almost stomach. The deceit was what truly poisoned the well. Returning to the living room, I picked up my phone and sent a brief message to my lawyer, confirming my intention to proceed with the divorce, regardless of Eleanor's cooperation. Then, I switched on my laptop and began to meticulously organize my financial records, gathering evidence, preparing for a potential legal battle. Since our marriage, Eleanor had been a stay-at-home wife, a life of leisure funded entirely by my relentless work. Small expenses were negligible, but every major outlay, every significant purchase, I carefully documented, listing each item with meticulous detail. It felt petty, almost vindictive, but I needed to be prepared. If Eleanor decided to fight, to drag this out, I would be ready. I couldn't help but wonder if William was even aware of Eleanor's prolonged absence, of her delaying the divorce. Perhaps even he had his limits when it came to her drama. A wry, humorless smile touched my lips. After a quick wash, I went to bed, the exhaustion finally pulling me under. Tomorrow, a new chapter would begin, whether Eleanor liked it or not. I woke up feeling strangely calm, almost detached. After getting ready, I sent Eleanor a final text, a curt reminder of our appointment. This time, she didn't play games. Perhaps the threat of public exposure, of a messy court battle, had finally penetrated her self-absorbed world. She arrived at the registry office, almost precisely on time. As we emerged, officially divorced, Eleanor's expression was a mask of conflicting emotions, resentment, regret, perhaps even a flicker of fear. The past few days in William's cramped, undoubtedly less comfortable home likely hadn't been a picnic. Arthur, she said, her voice brittle, cold. From now on, we have nothing to do with each other. Then, with a sharp turn, she walked away, disappearing into the bustling city crowd. I watched her go, feeling nothing. No triumph, no sadness, just a profound emptiness. Back at the office, I threw myself back into work, the familiar routine a welcome distraction. The financial settlement had been remarkably straightforward. Eleanor received a paltry $10,000, a sum that barely registered on my balance sheet. William, predictably, was furious, sending a barrage of angry messages via Eleanor's social media, demanding more, accusing me of being unfair. I simply deleted them, treating his pathetic outbursts as the meaningless noise they were. Suddenly, a wave of dizziness washed over me. The room spun, the fluorescent lights of the office blurring into indistinct shapes. The next thing I knew, I was collapsing, the world fading to black. When I opened my eyes again, I was in a hospital bed, the sterile scent of antiseptic filling my nostrils. A nurse informed me it was exhaustion, pure and simple, brought on by stress and lack of rest. Just then, the door to my room opened and a doctor entered. My vision cleared, and I blinked in surprise. It was Sarah Jenkins, my old college classmate. Her short, stylish haircut framed a face that was still strikingly beautiful, even more so, perhaps, than I remembered. She exuded an air of competence and quiet strength. Perhaps it was the lack of children, or simply her inherent vitality, but she seemed to have aged far more gracefully than Eleanor. "Arthur Wong, long time no see," she said, a warm smile lighting up her face. "Still pushing yourself too hard, even at our age? Doesn't your wife worry about you?" I shook my head, a wry smile touching my lips. "No wife anymore, Sarah. We divorced." Sarah's eyebrows rose in surprise, then softened with understanding. She hesitated for a moment, then said, with a playful glint in her eyes, "Well, in that case, does this mean I finally have a chance?" Even in college, Sarah had harbored a secret crush on me, making her feelings quite clear with shy smiles and lingering glances. But my heart had been set on Eleanor, and I had politely, but firmly, rebuffed Sarah's gentle advances. Life, it seemed, had a strange way of circling back. "Sarah, please," I said, shaking my head wearily. "I'm not even thinking about that right now. Just tired." The thought of romance, of starting over, felt impossibly distant, almost ludicrous. Sarah's smile softened into a gentle understanding. She reached out and tucked the blanket more securely around me. "I know, Arthur. Just kidding, sort of." Her eyes held a depth of sincerity that warmed me despite myself. "You rest now. We can catch up later." As she turned to leave, she stumbled slightly, her hand reaching out to steady herself. Inadvertently, she fell forward, landing gently in my arms. It was a fleeting moment of unexpected intimacy, a soft brush of warmth against my chest. And just then, as if orchestrated by some cruel twist of fate, Eleanor burst into the room. Her eyes widened in fury as she took in the scene. Sarah in my arms, a picture of unexpected closeness, her face contorted with rage. "I knew it!" she shrieked, her voice echoing through the quiet hospital room. "That's why you were so eager to divorce me. You already had a replacement lined up." "Arthur, you heartless old bastard!" she screamed, advancing on me, her hand raised as if to strike. Sarah stepped protectively in front of me, her voice calm but firm. "This is a hospital, Mrs. Wong," she said, her tone laced with professional authority, "not a public brawl arena. If you cause any more trouble, I will have security escort you out." Eleanor scoffed, her eyes narrowing as she recognized Sarah. "Oh, it's you. Sarah Jenkins, isn't it? Always had your claws out for Arthur, even back in college. Don't think I didn't notice." Sarah remained unfazed, her composure unwavering. "So what if I did have feelings for him back then?" she retorted, her voice steady. "And so what if those feelings still exist, even now? Unlike you, I would have cherished his love, not thrown it away." "What are you even doing here, Eleanor? Come to gloat?" Eleanor was momentarily speechless, silenced by Sarah's unexpected boldness. But I noticed something else, something that cut through the drama of the moment. On Eleanor's arm, just visible beneath her sleeve, was a dark bruise, a telltale mark of violence. William. It had to be William. He had always had a volatile temper, prone to outbursts of rage. Eleanor, caught in his orbit, was now bearing the physical scars of his anger. How had Eleanor even known I was in the hospital? That remained a mystery. "Dr. Jenkins is my attending physician, Eleanor," I said, my voice calm but firm, cutting through the escalating tension. "Don't try to twist this into something sordid. Now, please leave. I don't want to see you." My patience was completely exhausted. I had no desire to engage in another pointless, emotionally draining argument with her. Eleanor's face darkened. "Arthur, are you really telling me to leave? To choose her over me? Am I really worth so little to you? Less than this, old woman?" Her voice dripped with venom. The word "old woman" spat out like a curse. "I rushed here the moment I heard you were hospitalized. And this is how you repay me? No gratitude at all?" Seeing that I remained silent, unmoved by her theatrics, Eleanor's rage finally boiled over. With a shriek of frustration, she grabbed a nearby vase of flowers and hurled it against the wall. Porcelain shattered, water and flowers scattering across the floor. The commotion immediately drew the attention of hospital security. Two burly guards appeared at the door, their expressions stern. They quickly, efficiently, escorted a screaming, struggling Eleanor out of the room, leaving behind a trail of shattered porcelain and the lingering scent of lilies. Silence descended on the room, broken only by the sound of my own ragged breathing. Sarah quietly closed the door, shutting out the remnants of Eleanor's chaotic drama. Without a word, she began to gather the broken pieces of the vase, her movements gentle, calming. She was a steady presence in the storm, a beacon of quiet strength. Sarah didn't press me to talk, didn't pry into the details of my turbulent past. She simply created a space of peace and quiet, a sanctuary from the chaos that had become my life. And for that, I was deeply grateful. I drifted back to sleep, the lingering scent of lilies replaced by the comforting presence of Sarah. My days in the hospital passed in a peaceful haze, a welcome respite from the turmoil of my recent life. I had taken a leave of absence from work, severing ties with the relentless demands of my company. With my savings, I could easily afford to retire, to finally step off the treadmill of endless work. Lying in the hospital bed, weak but strangely at peace, I realized how much I had been missing, how much I had sacrificed in the relentless pursuit of wealth and status. Sarah's presence, her quiet care, her gentle humor, filled a void I hadn't even realized existed. Perhaps, in losing everything I thought I valued, I had stumbled upon something far more precious. Since my hospitalization, Sarah visited me daily, her presence a constant source of comfort and quiet joy. "How are you feeling today, Arthur?" Sarah asked gently, her voice a soothing balm. She approached the bed, a concerned expression on her face, my medical chart in her hand. "Better," I replied, managing a weak smile, trying to mask the lingering fatigue that still clung to me. Sarah nodded slowly, her brow furrowed slightly as she reviewed my chart. Then, she began her routine checkup, her movements practiced and efficient, yet imbued with a gentle tenderness that went beyond mere professional duty. In her quiet competence, in her unspoken concern, I found a depth of care I had never experienced before. Perhaps it was the stark contrast to Eleanor's self-absorbed demands, or simply Sarah's inherent kindness, but even the smallest gestures of her attention felt profoundly meaningful. I had been starved of genuine affection for so long that even a simple adjustment of my pillows, a gentle touch on my arm, resonated deeply within me. "You need to rest, Arthur. Don't push yourself," Sarah said, her voice soft but firm, as she finished her examination, adjusting my pillow to ensure I was comfortable. "And try not to think too much." "Thank you, Sarah," I murmured, my voice barely above a whisper, a deep sense of gratitude welling up within me. "Don't mention it," she replied, a warm smile gracing her lips. "We're old classmates, after all." She pulled up a chair and sat beside my bed. "Anything you need, just ask. I'm here to help in any way I can." I simply nodded, my heart overflowing with a warmth I hadn't felt in decades. I realized, with a quiet certainty, that Sarah's care for me extended far beyond the boundaries of doctor-patient relationship. She was attentive, thoughtful, anticipating my needs before I even voiced them. Yet, she maintained a respectful distance, never intruding, never prying, offering me the space and quiet I so desperately craved. It was a delicate balance of care and respect that was profoundly healing. As the days turned into nights, Sarah's visits became the anchor of my day, the highlight I eagerly anticipated. She would sit with me for hours, chatting about everything and nothing, sharing anecdotes from her life, listening patiently as I slowly began to open up about my own. She never judged, never offered unsolicited advice, simply listened with empathy and understanding. "Sometimes," Sarah said one afternoon, her voice thoughtful, her gaze gentle, "letting go of the past is the only way to move forward." Her words resonated deeply within me, striking a chord of truth that had been buried beneath years of resentment and regret. I remained silent for a moment, contemplating her words, the weight of my past pressing down on me. Then, slowly, I began to speak, the words tumbling out, a torrent of pent-up emotion finally finding release. "You're right," I admitted, my voice hoarse with emotion. "I keep thinking, if only I had seen Eleanor for who she truly was sooner, maybe I could have avoided all this pain." Sarah listened patiently, her eyes filled with understanding. When I finished, she reached out and gently took my hand, her touch a warm reassurance. "But you can't let past mistakes define your future, Arthur," she said, her voice firm but kind. "Everyone deserves a second chance, and that includes you." Her words were like a balm to my wounded soul. She was right. Whether it was Eleanor's betrayal, Ethan's rejection, none of it should negate the good things in my life, the years of hard work, the genuine love I had offered, however misguided it may have been. I deserved to be happy, to find peace, to start again. As time passed, the nature of my relationship with Sarah subtly shifted, deepening into something more profound than just doctor and patient, more intimate than just old friends. We talked for hours, sharing our hopes, our dreams, our vulnerabilities. I found myself looking forward to her visits with an eagerness I hadn't felt in years, craving her presence, her warmth, her quiet understanding. On my last day in the hospital, emboldened by a newfound sense of hope, I finally dared to voice the feelings that had been quietly blossoming in my heart. "Sarah," I began, my voice a little shaky, my heart pounding in my chest. "These past few weeks, your care, your kindness, it's meant the world to me. If you think it's possible, I'd like to explore a future with you. Beyond this hospital room, beyond just doctor and patient." Sarah looked at me, her eyes widening slightly, a flicker of surprise, then a radiant joy illuminating her face. A soft blush rose to her cheeks. Then, with a gentle smile that melted my heart, she nodded. "I would like that very much, Arthur." In that moment, a wave of lightness washed over me, a sense of release, of pure, unadulterated happiness. It was a new beginning, a chance at love, at connection, at a future I had almost given up on believing in. Meanwhile, on the other side of town, Eleanor and William's tumultuous relationship had imploded spectacularly. Rumors reached me, whispers carried on the hospital grapevine, of violent arguments, of broken furniture, of police interventions. Apparently, William, true to form, had quickly strayed, his infidelity sparking a furious, and predictably physical, confrontation with Eleanor. And Ethan, caught in the crossfire, had also felt William's wrath when his extravagant spending habits exceeded William's notoriously tight-fisted budget. He, too, had been on the receiving end of William's fists and promptly banished from the household. When these tidbits of their domestic chaos reached my ears, I felt a surge of something akin to satisfaction, a dark, almost shameful pleasure in their misery. "Serves them right," a voice whispered in my head. "Let them reap what they sowed." 2 days later, I was discharged from the hospital, stepping out into the bright sunshine, the warmth on my face feeling like a physical blessing. A new chapter, a new life, was beginning. Sarah, ever the concerned physician, gave me strict instructions to rest and avoid stress, but deep down, I knew some confrontations were unavoidable. I returned to my house, expecting a sense of peace, but the quiet was soon shattered by a frantic knocking at the door. Peeking through the peephole, I saw Eleanor and Ethan standing on my doorstep. Eleanor's face was tear-streaked, her hair disheveled. Ethan's expression was a mixture of fear and desperation. Eleanor pounded on the door, her voice cracking with sobs. "Arthur, please, open up. We need to talk." I hesitated for a moment, a flicker of old habits, of ingrained responsibility, tugging at me. But the years of betrayal, the decades of manipulation, hardened my resolve. I opened the door. The moment the door swung inward, Eleanor grabbed Ethan's arm and pushed him forward, both of them collapsing to their knees on my doorstep. Tears streamed down Eleanor's face as she pleaded, her voice thick with emotion. "Arthur, please, forgive us. I know I made a terrible mistake. I'm so sorry. Please, just give us another chance. I promise, I'll never contact William again. Never. We'll start over. Please, Arthur, please." Ethan, mimicking his mother's desperation, chimed in, his voice choked with sobs. "Dad, I'm sorry. I was wrong. I'll never be disrespectful again. Please, forgive Mom. Let us come home. Please, Dad, please." He reached out, his small hand grasping at my trouser leg, tears streaming down his face. I looked down at them, at Eleanor's pathetic display of remorse, at Ethan's tearful plea. But inside, I felt nothing. No anger, no pity, no lingering affection, just a vast, empty indifference. The woman kneeling before me was a stranger, a ghost of the woman I had once loved. The boy weeping at my feet was a stranger too, a child I had poured my heart and soul into, only to discover he was never mine. "Eleanor," I said, my voice calm, steady, devoid of emotion, "please, get up. There's nothing more to say. It's over." "Dad, please," Ethan wailed, his voice rising in hysteria. "Please, forgive Mom. Let's be a family again. Please, can't we just start over? Please, please, please." I gently disengaged Ethan's hand from my leg, my gaze unwavering. "You need to leave now," I said, my voice firm. "I won't let either of you hurt me again." Eleanor and Ethan remained kneeling, their pleas growing more frantic, more desperate, but I was unmoved. I turned and walked back inside, shutting the door firmly behind me, locking it against the ghosts of my past. Standing by the window, I watched them through the glass. Eleanor's sobs grew louder, more theatrical, Ethan's cries echoing her despair. Time stretched on, each minute a testament to their stubborn refusal to accept reality. Then, suddenly, Eleanor's body went limp. She collapsed onto the doorstep, unconscious. Ethan screamed, his voice thin and panicked as he tried to rouse her, shaking her shoulders, calling her name. The commotion outside began to attract the attention of passers-by. Concerned neighbors gathered, phones were pulled out, and someone called for an ambulance. Others, more practically minded, offered Ethan comfort and tried to help Eleanor. I watched it all unfold from the window, a detached observer, a ghost in my own house. No flicker of pity, no surge of responsibility, no vestige of the love I had once felt. It was a scene playing out on a stage, a drama that no longer involved me. They had made their choices, and now they were facing the consequences. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder as the ambulance approached. Paramedics arrived, efficient and professional, quickly assessing Eleanor, lifting her onto a stretcher. Ethan followed, his face streaked with tears, glancing back at my house, a silent plea in his eyes. But I remained motionless, a statue at the window, watching them disappear down the street. I knew, with a chilling certainty, that I could not and would not allow myself to be dragged back into their vortex of drama and deceit. The past was dead. It was time to live in the present, to build a future, finally, for myself. As the days turned into weeks, my relationship with Sarah blossomed, deepening into a comfortable, unwavering love. Soon, she made the decision to move in, bringing with her a sense of warmth, of laughter, of genuine companionship that had been absent from my life for far too long. "You need to take care of yourself, Arthur," Sarah chided gently, as she unpacked her clothes, carefully organizing my cluttered closet. "No more burning the candle at both ends." I know, I replied, a genuine smile gracing my lips, a warmth spreading through my chest. "I'm learning to prioritize myself, learning to accept love, learning to live again." With Sarah in my life, my house transformed from a lonely, echoing space into a home, filled with light and laughter. She was a wonderful cook, and evenings became a ritual of shared meals, of easy conversation, of simply being together. We talked about everything and nothing, from the intricacies of medicine to the beauty of poetry, from shared memories of college to our hopes for the future. I found myself eagerly anticipating the end of each workday, looking forward to returning home to Sarah's smile, to her quiet strength, to the unwavering love in her eyes. Eleanor and Ethan, however, were not quite ready to relinquish their hold on my life. They continued to appear, sporadically at first, then with increasing frequency, knocking on my door, calling my phone, sending tearful messages, begging for forgiveness, for reconciliation, for another chance. But each time, I remained firm, unwavering in my resolve. "Eleanor, it's over," I would repeat, my voice cold and final. "There is no going back." "But Arthur," she would plead, her voice laced with desperation, "don't you remember your promises? You swore you'd always be there for me. Always." I would simply shake my head, my heart untouched by her theatrics. "Those promises are null and void, Eleanor. You broke them long ago." Eventually, even Eleanor and Ethan seemed to realize the futility of their efforts. Their desperate pleas turned to angry accusations, their tearful apologies morphing into bitter recriminations. They shifted their focus, turning their ire towards William, demanding financial compensation for their suffering, for the emotional turmoil he had inflicted upon them. William, predictably, refused, and the three of them descended into a chaotic, public feud, their drama becoming the talk of our social circle, a source of morbid amusement for those who had long witnessed their dysfunctional dynamic. "Heard Eleanor and William are at it again," Sarah remarked one evening, a slight frown creasing her brow as she sorted through my mail. "Apparently, it got physical this time." "Let them sort it out," I said, shrugging dismissively, turning my attention back to Sarah. "Their drama is no longer my concern. My only concern is us." Sarah smiled, her eyes softening, a warmth radiating from her gaze. "Mine too, Arthur," she whispered. Eleanor and Ethan's saga reached its inevitable conclusion when William, finally pushed to his breaking point, simply vanished. He packed his bags in the dead of night and disappeared without a trace, leaving Eleanor and Ethan to face the wreckage of their self-made disaster. Eleanor sent me one final, rambling, accusatory message, a final desperate attempt to elicit some kind of response, some flicker of sympathy. But I remained silent, unmoved. It was over. Completely, irrevocably over. I sat down at my computer, and with a deep breath, began the process of digital erasure, blocking Eleanor's number, deleting her social media accounts, severing every last digital thread that connected us. Ethan's too. A clean break. Peace at last, I murmured to myself, a sense of profound relief washing over me. The air in the room felt lighter, cleaner, as if I had finally purged the toxins of the past. Life, with Sarah by my side, blossomed into something beautiful, something real. We began to plan our future, dreaming of travel, of building a life together, a home filled with love and laughter, not with lies and recriminations. Soon after, we decided to get married. Sarah, her eyes shining with happiness, her voice trembling with emotion, could barely contain her joy. "Arthur," she whispered, her voice choked with tears of happiness, "are you sure? Are we really going to the registry office tomorrow?" I turned to her, taking her hands in mine, looking deep into her eyes, my heart overflowing with a love that was both new and ancient, both exhilarating and profoundly comforting. "I'm sure, Sarah," I said, my voice firm, unwavering. "Being with you is the best decision I've ever made." And as we stood there, hand in hand, bathed in the warm glow of the setting sun, we smiled, a shared smile of hope, of joy, of a future. Finally, truly, beginning. I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my soul, that my good days, my real life, was just beginning.